Hey, everybody. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Into the Core podcast with myself, Linda. I'm really blessed to have you back on board. Today is really an exciting interview. I have been chasing Jamie, and he finally got back to me. I'm putting him on the spotlight. But he got back to me, and I was really excited because I've been dying to talk to him. But before we get started with Jamie, as always, we always have our intro. Let's get into it. Into the core.
Get into it.
All good things in Africa and beyond. Into the core.
Into the core.
Into the core.
Into the core.
Into the core. All good things in Africa and beyond. So first of all, I have to say thank you to Serenity for hosting me for this beautiful podcast. Serenity is absolutely amazing. If you come down to Diani, make sure you check out Anchor Restaurant and Bar. So I'm sitting on their rooftop, and I think it's just beautiful. So thank you, Serenity. Jamie Paul, welcome to Into the Core.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. I know I sound so excited. I'm like, Jamie. So Jamie is the co-founder of Pentatonic, and I came across their page last year, and I just thought, man, these are some really cool products. You've done stuff from recycling cigarette butts and making them into rings. I love the fashion aspect. I love your reuse of computers. And anyway, I will let you do the formalities. So, but welcome on board.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk. So it's taken a while to get there, but we're looking forward to having a chat today, but also very jealous of your background, by the way.
Yes, I told you, you're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. We would love to host you at Watano House. Yeah, that would be fantastic to have you guys here. All right, so let's start about how you guys, how you started Pentatonic. Where did the conversation of sustainable eco climate? How did that merge with you and your partner?
Sure, yeah. So my partner, Johan, and I were working in previous lives, in previous companies together on a number of projects. I was at Nike, based out in Portland, in Oregon.
Okay.
And he was in a firm that specialized in circular engineering and sustainable technologies, and specifically in the architecture kind of space. Anyway, Johan works on several projects for me. We, kind of more and more were introducing sustainable technologies into the Nike business and piloting things, trying new things, new materials, etc. And then over time, the longer our partnership went on, the more projects we did, the more we just became quite clear and aligned in our joint goal that more could be done in the consumer marketplaces specifically. Johan was very expertised in material science, in supply chain technologies around sustainability, and I was very experienced in the consumer business, branding, marketing, design side of things. And we just felt that there was a huge opportunity for consumer businesses, especially manufacturing-based businesses, to do things better, to do things differently, to do things with a more environmentally positive mindset. We were convinced that the world was going to rapidly accelerate into a circular economy, over the coming years, and we wanted to help get it there even faster. So we took the plunge in 2014, 2015. Just or left our previous businesses, ended up founding Pentatonic in 2015 I think it was. And then, here we are today, 6 years later. And yeah, we were, I think we were accurate in predicting that that most industries that that you could connect with a consumer are moving to much more circular and certainly sustainable measures. But there's a lot still more to do.
Of course. So once you guys started, what was like some of the first projects that you decided to tackle, and why? I mean, like.
Well, so with Pentatonic, our company, we operate in what's known as the circular economy. The circular economy is about essentially keeping materials always in a system. So it's designing out waste, it's creating products that don't end up in landfill, don't end up in the oceans, don't end up getting incinerated, because you're designing them to very easily recycle. And therefore, that set of materials can have multiple life cycles over multiple applications over multiple years, and therefore you're avoiding waste, but you're also avoiding the creation of new products out of virgin materials. So it's kind of doing two jobs at once. But essentially, the circular economy is about keeping materials in the loop. And we started out, we always said we wanted to lead the world into the circular economy. That was our vision when we set out with Pentatonic. We started as a standalone, direct-to-consumer brand, focusing on furniture and homeware. We were always going to expand out a bit from there. Within a few weeks of us launching, it became clear that a lot of businesses wanted to know how to do it. And when I say businesses, I'm talking about global brands, kind of household names, approached us to help them start to introduce circular practices and circular methodologies in their production culture and their design culture. And so we now have a business that's half of it is creating products and selling them directly to the consumer. Half of our business is working with some of the biggest brands in the world in multiple different sectors, creating multiple different products to help them, operate a more sustainable kind of culture, and allow their consumers to live a more sustainable, more circular lifestyle. And so, there's first collaboration project we did was with Starbucks, and we've gone on since.
Oh, wow.
We have multiple relationships with kind of brands that your audience I'm sure have heard of: Red Bull, Nike, Adidas, Microsoft, and several others. Some we can't mention because we're working on projects for 2022, 2023 and beyond. We've it's certainly, there's no shortage of businesses that want to aware their responsibility as giant manufacturers and giant producers of things, that we're regularly being asked to help brands kind of accelerate their own circular economy practices.
Yeah. What about smaller brands? I mean, like, what does that look like for you? I mean, like, the brands that really want to get into a more sustainable platform, because I know now you've dealt with mass, the Nikes and the Works and the Starbucks, but what about the ones that are younger, smaller, but and also much more conscious of that they're getting into the space and they want to know how do they do it? What are some of the first steps or some of the things for them to think about?
The good thing with some of the newer, smaller companies is they are forming at a time where there's much more awareness and understanding around the right and wrongs when it comes to creating products or delivering services. Right. One of the reasons I think it's the large brands that often approach us, or the large brands we often work with, is they might have been creating products or services the same way for 50 years, 30 years, 100 years. And that's really, really hard to quickly adopt new cultures. With the younger companies, that there tends to be more, we'll try and information share as much as possible. We'll try and broadcast as many of our case studies as possible, so that we can provide guidance from afar. But I think it's where we can, we do work with smaller design houses, especially when it's on something that's around a really kind of boundary pushing idea, or working with a new material for the first time, or tackling a very specific challenge. Then we love working with some of the smaller, newer brands and businesses. Often they tend to be a bit more nimble, a bit more progressive, a bit faster to work with. And so we definitely kind of, the only filter policy, or the only policy that we apply to sort of saying yes or no to working with to working with new brands, is basically around authenticity. Are they doing this for the right reasons? Do they really want to make a difference? Do they really want to change the way they create products, or explore new technologies that are going to sort of be positive for the world? But then also impact. One of the reasons why we get a lot of enjoyment, kind of pleasure, let's say, from working with some of the biggest organizations in the world, is because that represents some of the biggest impacts in the world. If you can change one item for a company like Starbucks or Nike or Microsoft, or and the list goes on and on, then that one item might be manufactured in tens of millions of units. And so if there's something better about that than what it would have been before, or if it's designed to come back and be recycled again and again, that's a huge amount of impact on one project. So that's often why we kind of tend to, I think, work on some of the larger, or work with some of the larger organizations, is simply because of the level of impact we can achieve with a partner that has that much reach. And so that tends to be the work that you hear most about, the work we do. But then also there's a lot that we do kind of behind the scenes, a lot of smaller, super hyper-local type work that we'll do. We try and work on everything that's authentic, or say yes to things that are authentic and that are genuinely driving change and impact. And more that's getting harder to identify, because there's a lot of people saying a lot of things. It's very noisy out there in the world of sustainability. Everyone's claiming their products and offerings, and everyone's saying, "Oh, we're sustainable," and that word has been hijacked a little bit for kind of commercial terms. And so, being able to separate what's greenwashing, and we get a lot of people asking us, "Oh, can we just work with you to say we're working with you, or can we collaborate on something that's kind of just they want to announce immediately?" There's a lot of greenwashing out there, and I think that's tough for the consumer to be able to decipher. So I think that it's important for us that we can, that we very carefully consider the work we take on. It has to be authentic. It has to have purpose at the heart of it, rather than marketing, or rather than communication, or rather than followers. It must always be our purpose for us.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you're right. The word sustainable has really been hijacked by so many people, and they claim that they are sustainable. But, can you break down the word sustainable for us? Because I know a lot of companies that say, "Oh yeah, we are sustainable," but I know a lot of people still don't understand the back end of what sustainability is, or what it means to be a sustainable company.
I'll try and answer it with an observation, really. And I'm a sort of marketeer by sort of training. My college, the majority of my career was in marketing, branding, etc., and design. So very much around giving the consumer something that they may need, or something that they may want, or what have you. So My worry around, or my observation around sustainability, is a lot of brands are using sustainability as positioning. It's as a device, and where a trend that is very obvious now is that a lot of organisations are talking about 1% of their activity 99% of the time. So then, there might be trialing a very small sort of sustainable pilot, or there might be one product line that has a tiny bit of recycled material in, or something, one experiment they might be doing that they're telling the world, "Look at this, everything is made from ocean plastic," and that's our brand, and aren't we kind of delivering impact? So the worrying thing for me about sustainability is, and I think you touched on it there, sustainability really is something that is self-regulated or is unregulated, however you want to define it, because it doesn't really have a, it's more of a, it doesn't really have a definitive way of measuring it, and that's where I think that's where the danger is, because if brands say, hey, this is more sustainable, it's like, well, how, it's hard to prove or disprove that. I think what we always try and encourage our kind of partners that we work with is sustainability isn't a positioning, it's not a communication device, it's a culture, it's a way of operating. It's something that should be. It's almost like, or I like to think about it as almost being transparent or honest or authentic. It's just a way you go about doing or operating as a business. And I think claiming to be sustainable when it's hard to measure it, hard to define it, I think is always a bit murky and it's a bit hard to sort of define, and therefore I think it's taken advantage of. The most important thing is really just to do that anyway, and just kind of focus on being able to be responsible, still operating your business and driving all the things you need to do, profit, returns, revenue, etc. But doing it in a way that's future-proof, that is positive for the environment. And a kind of long rambling answer, but for me, I think sustainability. The difficulty is there is no clear
definition of it.
Well, there is exactly no clear definition of it, and it is in the eye of the beholder, and in the eye and in the definition that it's a self-regulated thing. That I think that the quicker we move on from the word sustainability, I think that the better it's going to be certainly for consumers that are very confused with how sustainable is brand A versus brand B, or product A versus product B. And so, it's thrown around a lot. I think the consumer's a bit blind to it because they just see it everywhere. What does it actually mean? Well, it's down to the brands to define it themselves. Of what they should define their own definition of sustainable. This is sustainable because, and often that bit is the bit that's missing, or that's a bit vague, or
it's vague,
or a long way in the future. We're sustainable because by 2030 we're going to be blah blah blah. Well, that's a long way away, and so it's a word I'm not a huge fan of, and so but it's something that the consumer understands. So trying to find that balance is not so easy.
All right, I think that's actually a very interesting way of looking at it, because even now as a consumer, anybody who says, oh yeah, we're a sustainable brand, the question that a lot of people should ask is how are you sustainable? Like break it down for us so that we can have that better understanding. But moving away from the word sustainability, let's talk about environment and climate change and your positioning as Pentatonic, because your products that you create, you're very conscious about what you do and the products that you use, and the people probably, obviously you've spoken about the companies that you have worked with, but for me, the back end of what you guys are doing always comes back into environment, and it comes back into climate. Can we talk a little bit about that? Your positioning as, Pentatonic.
Yeah, I mean, the climate crisis has multiple levels and multiple components of crisis, going on. And I think our area of focus is around materials and the type of materials that are used in products and manufacturing, and the culture of product creation to avoid waste, to use circular materials, to use materials that will compost versus just be kind of discarded, to make things in a way that could be easily recycled, etc., etc. We've always kind of covered that. I think there's lots. I mean, the UN says that I think we have 9 years left before the impact or the pollution of industries cannot be reversed, cannot be turned around. Actually, I'm very doubtful if we even have that long before or whether we can even U-turn on anything that on the extent of the impact. I think pollution is really where, ultimately the circular economy is a solution for. Rather than the traditional way of making products is you kind of make, the consumer takes, and then it's wasted. So make, take, waste is kind of the way that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, for example, defines the traditional linear, as it's called, way of consumption.
Yeah.
The circular model is that you kind of you essentially do all of that, but then at the end, instead of wasting, you reuse, you bring it back in, and so that same material goes round and round, and so therefore pollution is saved, and waste is saved, and landfill is saved, and
Right.
plastics and rubbish going into the ocean is avoided, or incineration, where kind of nasty air pollution is created, it is avoided, and so that's the area that we focus on. I think more emotionally, I think certainly Johan and I, we had a very kind of legacy mindset to when we started Pentatonic. I think both being, kind of in that, just moving into this sort of period of becoming parents. I always thought, what do I want to say that what do I want my legacy to be for my daughter's generation and hers to follow? Is it that I've helped make big companies make a load of stuff and sell a load of stuff? Is that super cool, or is it better to create or help businesses make things in positive ways and change the way they work? And essentially, what I like the idea of, or kind of a bit of a dream I have, is that when my daughter's now 4, is like my age, she's 40, it doesn't understand the concept of waste. Like, why would we waste this thing, this cup, this glass? Why would we? Because it's valuable, because it's material that I can trade back or turn into something else. It's, the dream I have is that there is no concept of rubbish, because it's all doing something. It's either being recycled, or it's being degraded, and it's kind of nourishing the earth, feeding the earth as part of that circle. But there is no waste, because why would? Because materials are finite and they're valuable, and so let's use them almost like currency. That's really that's the. If you imagine, if we set up camp in Mars, let's say we did create a colony in Mars, or you set up a kind of, if you're living on a desert island, you have to set up an infrastructure. You would only be able to use the materials you had at your disposal. Same with Mars. If you flew to Mars and colonized Mars, you could only use what you took. So you'd have to start. You'd have to do something. You have to create something out of your kind of damaged spacesuits. You'd have to repurpose equipment that you had to be able to filter water, to be able to kind of protect you from kind of the heat, whatever it might be, or from the elements. And so I think, if the world's population had that mindset that we only use what we only repurpose the materials we already have, rather than constantly creating this tap of virgin materials, then I think we'd be in a far healthier place as a planet. But the reality is, there's with the tap of kind of product creation made out of unhealthy materials designed for single use just is endless and goes on and on and on. And so, I think moving to a place, or getting to a place, so I guess kind of my dream of my daughter and her generation to follow, never thinking, of course, or always thinking, of course, we'd never waste anything, because this material is so precious. There's only a certain amount of it that could be turned to multiple things, or I could trade it for currency to spend on other things. Then I think that's definitely a dream that gets me out of bed every day.
That's a beautiful thing. I know for us here I know I don't know if they still do it. Anyway, for the Kenyans who are watching, you had the Chupanandebe guy. Anyway, he's a guy who used to come around every Saturday morning collecting bottles, and so your glassware, your glass bottles, or your plastic bottles, and he would go and trade that in for currency. But in my back of my head, I'm like, where was he trading it in, and what happened to the rest of the bottles? And because that process never was completed in my childhood, for me, I'm not talking about every other Kenyan, but for me, I was like, the story started there, and I'm thinking, well, that's that's actually how it should be, but what was it used for again? You know, that's a good question for me to even bring up with some of my audience members. So if anybody knows, maybe you can, you know, kind of chime down below and tell me what happened to that guy who was in every neighborhood, picking up and collecting all these bottles and stuff. But how do you see, and what do you see right now as the future? What is the first thing that a company or a person should do to change or to get into the narrative of these are precious materials and this is how we start? You know,
Well, I mean, the simplest thing that people can do is to try and use materials that can be recycled and be recycled easily. So what I mean by that is wherever you are in the world, your recycling infrastructure, it will vary from other parts of the world. So it might be quite advanced, like it is here in the UK, for example. It might be kind of not as developed in other parts of the world, or there might be advanced or a kind of a good plastics recycling infrastructure, a terrible glass infrastructure, in recycling infrastructure. So it all depends on territory to territory. But if you know that there is a municipal system or an easy way you can either deposit bottles or plastics or clothes or whatever it might be, then buying products in packaging like that can be easily recycled is a good start. You know, trying to avoid buying products that you know will only have one use, you know, single-use products. I think trying to get more reusables is a very basic and simple way to, or step forward, you know, to have your own water bottle, your own utensils, so you don't need to get products that come in packaging designed for one use. There's lots of basics that you can do. And yeah, just it's consumption doesn't need to be a bad thing. It's all about the way we consume and the type of packaging it involves, the type of products we use, how long their life cycle is going to be, can it be recycled at the end of life? I think there's lots of easy wins, but it's still, you know, we've still got a long way to go. You know, there's still a lot we have to do. You know, there's still a lot of education that kind of. There's a big knowledge gap, I think, of what can be recycled, what can't be recycled, what type of material is that? Is that good material? Is it bad material? Should I buy this? Should I not buy this? What actually happens at the recycling centre and what actually happens when our waste is collected? There's huge knowledge gaps everywhere, which is difficult. Which is difficult for large populations and for people living in a. You know, I think if you went out onto any street in any part of the world and asked about, you know, a few basic questions around materials or recycling, I think you get, you know, 10 different answers from 10 different people, because it isn't straightforward. There's lots of materials out there. There are billions of products out there, and knowing what can be recycled, where, by whom, is difficult. So I think information and communication is the key.
Oh, I like that. I mean, like it opens also up a platform for me right here in Diani to, I mean, I know that they've got different points, but just to create the narrative and let people know exactly where these places are. I know we have a few more minutes before you get into your next meeting, but I wanted to find out for you, how is a product that, you know, the beautiful, what do you call it? It's not cutlery. It is cutlery that you did with Pharrell Williams. How is that doing? Because in my head, I was thinking this is something that everybody should have in their bag.
Yeah, I mean, it was something we felt was a real missing product opportunity. You know, bottles, lunchboxes, etc. were already very well established in the reusables. You know, food and beverage is notorious for the amount of packaging waste that you have in that space. And I think single-use cutlery is a huge one that often gets overlooked, you know, because, you know, a lot of the emotive imagery around plastics in the ocean, for example, will be bags or bottles. But in actual fact, cutlery by product type is one of the highest waste streams, certainly in plastics, in our waterways, let alone landfill. And it's also something that was very, very connected to a festival experience. You know, when you go to a music festival or an arts festival or a literature festival or a dance festival, whatever it might be, you know, they exist all around the world. It will normally involve you consuming and using a lot of single-use items, you know, for when you're eating or drinking or whatever it is. And so it was the insight. It came around from, you know, thinking about the festival experience, which is obviously a link to the collaborator. It went from there, really. And we soon realized that this product actually had a very high relevance in living in a city, going camping, going hiking, you know, kind of taking it to school. You know, there's the actual product need and product use case existed everywhere, and it allows people to avoid single use, kind of when dining on the go, but also perhaps more predominantly, or kind of what's come to light even over the last 18 months is actually how important it is to know where your utensils have been, because of, you know, the kind of the worry about, you know, germs spreading, etc. You know, I think people are understandably much more wary about communal pots or forks in a takeout bar or whatever it might be, and so there's also a cleanliness and safety component to it as well. So it's going really well. We're about to drop a load of new colours and styles. Next week, I think we start launching a whole new series of colours for the summer. New collaborations coming down the line. It's going from strength to strength, that one.
All right. I want to share with everybody some of your products before I let you go. I feel like I need to have a part 2 with you at some point down the line in the next couple of months, you know, when you've got some of those products dropping in. If that's okay with you. But I know I'll let me show everybody some of the products. So I'm going to play it in the background. Hold on one second. Let's see. All right.
Yeah, so you can see the sort of the diversity of the type of products that we create, over a range of materials that we can work with. You know, whether it's using supply chain waste from the fashion industry to make hangers, creating really beautiful art pieces of furniture, taking waste materials from electronic goods and turning them into new products, or creating advanced air filtration systems to avoid avoid the huge waste stream of single-use masks. Create
I love the masks.
Filtration ground. Yeah, so it's called Masuku,
anyway,
and there's plenty more of that to come as well.
I love your products. I'm really looking forward. I mean, like I told you last time, I would love to see how we could, you know, in the greater part of everywhere, that we could be able to access some of your products. So some conversation that I'm going to have with you, because I think it's very necessary out here. But you know what? I'm going to let you go for your next meeting. I know you've got a lot of things that you're doing, but thank you very much. I'm blowing kisses from Diani, and say hello to your little daughter. My son's 5 years old, going on 6. And I'm thinking of doing a story about the whole recycling bit and having that conversation with children, but we'll talk about it later. So take care of yourself, and thank you so much. Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right. Take care of yourself. Right. Best of luck.
Have a great day.
All right. You too. Take care. So everybody, thank you so much for being part of the Pentatonic conversation. As you can see, there's so much to talk about, and we didn't even touch or scratch the base of it. But I know that he's got a meeting that he was going into, and it was just really important for me to start the conversation. So if you would like to access some of his products, please let me know. So I'm going to, see how we're bringing them in, as well as, continuing to have that conversation about how corporates could get into not the sustainability, but how you can actually answer those questions and using products that can be recycled. All right. Sending love from Diani. Thank you to Serenity for allowing me to use your beautiful rooftop. Backdrop was everything. Thank you to Watano House. So if you want bookings for your family during this, holiday season is coming up. So now is the time to actually get started with your bookings. It's a beautiful 7-bedroom house that has You can fit 14 people in there, so it's great for a very close pod of friends or very close pod of family, private chefing and the works. So make sure you get in touch with me. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week for our next interview. Look out for it and sending you love. Have a beautiful weekend ahead. Ciao.